She was a nasty piece of work. Everybody knew. The guards knew. The staff at Clarence House knew. The neighbours walking past on the mall knew. The journalists who covered the royals for 30 years knew. The bank manager at Coutts knew. Queen Elizabeth II absolutely knew. And none of them said a word. For 101 years, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the Queen Mother, the nation's grandmother, the smiling symbol of Blitz spirit, ran up millions in debt, drank gin before noon every single day, treated non-white staff with what witnesses called undisguised contempt, and never once faced a consequence. Not one. Because the system, the monarchy, the media, the palace machine, wrapped her in the most expensive lie British taxpayers never knew they were funding. This isn't an exposé. There's nothing here to expose. This is a receipt. Every fact you're about to hear has been documented by biographers, reported by journalists, and confirmed by the people who were actually there, inside those cream-colored walls on the mall. The only thing that's new is that someone's finally saying it out loud, in order, with the numbers attached. So let's start where the money is. When the Queen Mother died on March 30th, 2002, her estate was valued at somewhere between 50 and 70 million pounds. 50 to 70 million. Let that land for a second. Because at the same time, her overdraft at Coutts & Co., the private bank on the Strand that served the royals since the 18th century, had been reported in 1999 at 4 million pounds. And multiple sources, including royal biographers and investigative journalists, place the real figure closer to 7 or 8 million. How does a woman worth tens of millions owe millions? Simple. She spent without limit, without oversight, and without the faintest flicker of guilt. Because she knew someone would clean it up, and someone always did. Clarence House operated with a staff of 50 employees. Pages, footmen, housemaids, kitchen workers, a butler, dressers, a private secretary, equerries, chauffeurs. This wasn't a household. It was a minor court running every single day for 5 decades at a cost that dwarfed her civil list annuity of £643,000 a year. That annuity, parliamentary money allocated for her public duties and household, was never, not once, sufficient to cover what she was actually spending. And the spending was relentless. Multiple residences, Clarence House in London, Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, Burke Hall on the Balmoral estate, and the Castle of May in Caithness, which she bought in 1952 and poured years of renovation money into. Each one staffed, each one heated, each one maintained to her standards, which were the standards of a woman born into the Scottish-English aristocracy in 1900, a class that considered money something too abundant to discuss. Then the horses. Over her lifetime, the Queen Mother owned more than 500 National Hunt racehorses. 500. Training fees, veterinary bills, transport, jockeys, race entries. The operation was enormous and constant. It was presented to the public as a charming hobby, a spirited old dear who loved the races. Financially, it was a hemorrhage that never stopped bleeding. And the wine. The cellar at Clarence House was maintained with the seriousness of a professional sommelier's operation. The kitchen produced multi-course meals daily at a standard that rivaled London's best restaurants. Fresh flowers were refreshed constantly throughout the house. Couture, because she understood always the performative dimension of royalty, added yet more. None of this was discretionary in her mind, not a single line item. She didn't overspend because she was careless. She overspent because she genuinely didn't believe the limits applied to her. And here's the thing. She was right. They didn't. Queen Elizabeth II intervened repeatedly to service her mother's debts. The palace never disclosed the mechanics because the secrecy was the point. But the outline has been established by journalists and biographers. The Queen drew on the privy purse, her private income from the Duchy of Lancaster, to settle portions of the Coutts overdraft. Reports documented by journalists at The Guardian indicate the Queen dealt directly with the bank. She'd pay it down. The Queen Mother would keep spending. The overdraft would climb again. The Queen would pay it down again. Cycle after cycle after cycle. For years. No racehorses were sold. No staff were dismissed. No residences were relinquished. No entertaining was curtailed. Not a single adjustment. The Queen Mother apparently never expressed awareness of, embarrassment about, or any intention to address the burden she was placing on her own daughter. The Coutts overdraft was, in her understanding, someone else's problem. And the system, the bank, the palace, the Queen herself, confirmed that understanding by making it true. But it gets worse. In 1993, a deal was struck between the palace and John Major's government that exempted transfers of assets between the sovereign and their immediate predecessor from inheritance tax. The stated reason was to prevent the Crown's assets from being eroded by successive death duties. In practice, it meant that when the Queen Mother died, her entire estate passed to Elizabeth II without a penny of tax. For an estate worth 50 to 70 million pounds, that's a tax saving of 20 to 28 million pounds. Money that, under the rules applying to literally every other British citizen, would have gone to the Treasury. And in 1994, 1 year after that deal was signed, the Queen Mother placed 2/3 of her liquid fortune into a trust fund for her great-grandchildren. Think about that. A woman carrying millions in debt at Coutts found the resources to set up a multi-million-pound trust for her descendants. The money wasn't absent. It was directed elsewhere. The public paid. The public always paid. Now let's talk about what the staff actually saw. Every day, for 50 years. The daily routine at Clarence House was fixed, consistent, and documented by multiple independent witnesses. Gin and Dubonnet before lunch, mixed heavy on the gin, served around noon or just before. Wine with the meal, always good wine, always carefully selected. Port or a liqueur after. Then in the late afternoon and evening, champagne. Often Veuve Clicquot. Sometimes more gin. Sometimes whiskey. Every day. Not weekends only, not special occasions. Every single day. The brother of a Clarence House guard put it in 5 words that have since entered the public vocabulary of this story. She drank like a fish. He said it plainly, the way a man repeats what his brother told him about his job. No drama, no embellishment, just fact. The lunches were the centerpiece. Long, elaborate, multi-course affairs that stretched deep into the afternoon. The guest lists drew from a distinctive circle, witty, cultivated, frequently gay men who served as companions, entertainers, and confidants. Sir Frederick Ashton, the founder choreographer of the Royal Ballet. Sir Cecil Beaton, the photographer. Noel Coward, the playwright. These were the names that rotated through the dining room, alongside others of similar profile and similar function. They were charming. They were entertaining. They were, in the social dynamics of the era, entirely dependent on her patronage. But the constant presence, the man who was there every day for 51 years, was William Tallon. Backstairs Billy. He entered royal service in 1951 and served as page of the backstairs, the servant responsible for the Queen Mother's private entertaining until the day she died. He mixed the drinks. He managed the below-stairs household. He saw everything. Tallon was openly gay, a significant drinker himself, and devoted to the Queen Mother with a loyalty that bordered on obsession. After she died, the palace evicted him from his grace and favor quarters at Clarence House. Just like that. 51 years of service, and they put him out. He died in 2007, 5 years later, alone. That eviction made him bitter. And bitter people talk. He spoke to Tom Quinn, among others, whose books on royal household life draw extensively on staff testimony from this period. The accounts are remarkably consistent across multiple sources. The same routine, the same quantities, the same patterns described by people who didn't know each other and had no reason to coordinate their stories. Why did the Queen Mother surround herself with gay men? Biographers have offered the same explanation, and it's the one that fits. These were men who understood the management of a public face and a private reality. They were entertaining without being sexually complicated. They offered devotion without the entanglements of heterosexual courtship. They were willing to drink at her pace and on her schedule. And they were, in every way that mattered, safe. They wouldn't sell stories. They couldn't afford to. That safety extended to what they witnessed beyond the drinking. The guard's brother didn't just say she drank like a fish. He finished the sentence. She drank like a fish and was very racist. The racism documented by biographers Christopher Wilson in The Windsor Knot and Colin Campbell in The Queen Mother, The Untold Story of Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, wasn't a matter of occasional slips or generational blind spots. It was reflexive, casual, directed. Non-white members of staff, visitors, and public figures were subjected to commentary that those who heard it described with that phrase: undisguised contempt, not whispered, not coded, said out loud, in her house, to whoever happened to be in the room. And it wasn't confined to private remarks about servants. When Diana, Princess of Wales, became involved with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian-born businessman Mohammed al-Fayed, the Queen Mother's objections were reported by multiple sources within the royal household. The objections were layered: ethnicity, religion, social background. But the racial dimension, according to those who actually heard her express her views, was unmistakable. She was the family matriarch. Her opinions carried weight. Her pronouncements had an authority that younger members of the family found difficult to counter, whether or not the reigning queen shared her views. And nobody told her to stop. Not once. Not about the racism, not about the drinking, not about the spending. Because Clarence House was her domain, and its rules were hers. And the entire apparatus of the British monarchy existed, in part, to ensure that no one ever told her anything she didn't want to hear. Which brings us to the machinery of the lie. On September 13, 1940, Buckingham Palace was bombed. Elizabeth, then Queen Consort, delivered the single most effective piece of public relations in royal history. "I'm glad we've been bombed. It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face." That line, whether spontaneous or rehearsed, built the foundation. Everything after was just maintenance. Her 80th birthday in 1980, national celebration, television specials. Her 90th in 1990, same treatment. Commemorative stamps, balcony appearances. Her 100th in 2000, a public parade, blanket television coverage, wall-to-wall reverence. Not one mainstream outlet used any of these occasions to examine what was actually happening inside Clarence House. Not one. Because the press operated under a system of royal deference that had been running for decades. Editors spiked unflattering stories. Journalists who published critical pieces found their palace access restricted. The Royal Press Office managed information with a precision that would have impressed a Cold War intelligence service. And the cost of honesty? Lost access, professional marginalization, legal threats, was always higher than the cost of complicity. Journalists who covered the royals during this era have since admitted, in memoirs and interviews, that they knew. They knew about the drinking. They knew about the spending. They knew about the attitudes. They didn't publish what they knew. William Shawcross, the authorized biographer, produced a 1,000-page account that managed to navigate the entire Queen Mother's life without confronting any of it head-on. Authorized biography. Authorized omission. The public was told for 60 years that this woman was the nation's sweetheart, the last link to the Blitz, a grandmother figure of warmth and grace. And behind the facade, behind the wave, the hat, the smile, there was a woman carrying 7 or 8 million pounds in debt she refused to acknowledge, drinking gin before noon every day of her adult life, treating non-white staff with open contempt, and expecting her daughter to quietly write the checks that kept the entire performance running. Here's what gets lost in the telling. This wasn't a secret. Secrets require effort to conceal. This was common knowledge that an entire system chose not to speak aloud. The guards at the gate knew. The 50 staff inside those walls knew. The neighbors on the mall knew. The journalists knew. The bank knew. The Queen knew. The only people who didn't know were the ones watching the television specials and buying the commemorative stamps and lining the streets for the birthday parades. The public, who were never given the chance to see what everybody else had seen for decades. The real scandal was never the drinking or the deaths or the racism. Drunks exist. Racists exist. Reckless spenders exist in every family in every country. The real scandal is the conspiracy of silence. The monarchy, the media, the palace apparatus, all working in concert to present a known alcoholic racist who couldn't pay her own bills as the nation's beloved grandmother. And then, when she died on 30 March 2002, expecting the public to mourn her. They told you she was the nation's sweetheart. You knew better. You always did. Everybody knew. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real ones, with the numbers attached, subscribe and stick around. There's plenty more where this came from.